So just for starters, many of you probably heard me say this, we thought we could just spend a few minutes talking about, as a group, with what you like about mentoring and what you find challenging about mentoring. So just a few minutes of that to kind of get us all thinking about mentoring instead of the class we taught this morning, or the toilet that was overflowing at home, or whatever else is going on in your world. So anybody, what do you like about mentoring?
I like it. I have this feeling that I can participate in somebody transforming their life, the way they think about themselves, their ability, the way they think about science. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, okay, so she said, for those of you who couldn't quite hear, the opportunity to participate in transforming somebody else's life, and what else? You said the second part of it.
Well, it's not just how they think about science, it's also how they think about their self, their ability, how they grow into a person. So it's like a very powerful contribution I can have in someone's life. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, anyone else? What else do you like about mentoring? Yeah.
I really like watching students develop their intellectual identity and maturity and independence, and kind of seeing that process unfold.
Can people hear okay, or should I repeat things? In the back, can you hear? Okay. All right, great. What else do people like? Yeah.
This is maybe selfish, but I like when things that I know in my experiences can be useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
That feels good.
Yeah, it's good for us too. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What else? What else do people like about mentoring? Yeah.
I like being able to bring out the best in each student, to be able to highlight their strengths.
Yes, great. One more thing you like about mentoring. Anyone else? Yeah.
Mentoring is just for me, it's a win-win situation. We can share our tips when we learn the lessons to our students, and also we can get some new insights. There are new generation students. They sometimes have some new ideas. So when we communicate, some sparks will happen, and that's good for everyone.
Yes, great. Absolutely. What about the challenges? What kinds of challenges do you experience with mentoring? I'm sure there are a couple. Yeah.
I don't know if what I'm doing works. It's like raising a child. I want them to be happy and successful in 20, 30 years. So it's like here, I do what I think is the right thing that will prepare them for the path ahead, but at the end of the day, I don't know what they'll do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great comment. Although they're a little closer to adulthood than our babies are, but exactly that same experience. Other challenges, yeah.
Navigating difficult conversations when the students aren't meeting your expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very, very, very difficult. Okay, what else is challenging? Yeah.
I would say the extremes on a self-efficacy continuum. So I think the challenges on one hand are forming a mentoring relationship, mentee-mentor relationship with someone who can't be taught because they already know it. They construe their existence that way, versus the other extreme where someone just is really gifted and has all these brilliant ideas and passion for their discipline, but they really don't see themselves as having that capability or even any capacity to even grow and develop. So somehow bringing those extremes somewhere into reality is the challenge.
So I'm a psychologist, and I'll say that's the narcissist and the neurotic, yes, the two ends. Other challenges that people think of? Yeah.
I think just sometimes figuring out how to motivate students when they're either stuck or, in that kind of place where they're not making progress and all your usual tricks are not working.
Yes. Okay, one more on the challenges side. Oh, two more, okay. Yeah.
So I have often wondered how much getting a PhD is actually can coexist with having sort of an idea of a balanced life. And I feel like advising students where I'm asking more of them, that students I feel like I'm I'm disrupting the possibility of balance, or, you know, right? Being able to sort of have a healthy, I don't know, mentality about graduate school. Sometimes I feel like I'm a whip cracker, and that makes me feel really uncomfortable. And so I don't know, I've not really figured out how to sort of help students know how to push themselves without pushing themselves too far, or how to sort of work with students that way.
That's a great comment. I was on faculty at Rutgers for a long time, and for a while our department chair at orientation for the new grad students would say, you are not going to have a life during graduate school. You are going to eat psychology, you're going to breathe psychology, you're going to sleep psychology 24/7. And I was the director of our clinical training program, and I'd stand up and say, well, that's actually not healthy. But you're right, there's a kind of dynamic between those two approaches, which is just like graduate school is everything and your career is everything, and the real world, there's life too. One more comment on challenges.
So maybe some people will actually see this as a positive. So I feel like my students, because I have a similar maybe lifestyle, kids and so on. Like I'm a bit older than them, but I feel like we could be friends, right? And so I automatically just use an approach that is very, very friendly, and I don't like not being myself, and that is myself, just being like that, right? But I'm concerned, I haven't seen this happen, well, maybe in the past I have, not here. But I'm concerned a little bit about people become too friendly, and I'm like, I use words like, oh yeah, maybe you're right, yeah, maybe I was wrong, things like that kind of a way of talking with them. What if they lose respect for what I suggest or over-question me, which, questioning is great, but I've also had students where I had that approach with them and they felt like they could just question every little thing that I told them, like, look, I've done this for 15 years, like, if we're gonna question every word I say, we're never gonna get done. So finding that balance.
Yeah, and also, I thought that's a really interesting comment. I thought you were gonna go a little bit different way, which is the balance between having too personal a relationship, and not an inappropriate personal, but having a relationship becomes too much like a friendship, and kind of how you balance that as well. But, okay.
So far that's okay. I mean, I feel like I asked them, like if they told me like they had some infection the week before, I asked them what they're doing, and talk about their hobbies and the vacation they just had, briefly at the beginning of the meeting. And I feel like so far that's fine, and often they will be the ones who switch to the topic at hand anyway.
Yeah.
But I can see how that could also become an issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last comment.
No, I wanted to say that some condition is accused about relationship, because they're trying to be nice to you, right?
Yeah.
And like, you think you want friendship, but in reality, it's not at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's also a hard balance. Great. Okay. So I think hopefully now we're all thinking only about mentoring. You can see the schedule here. Julie's going to be talking now about some best practices, mostly a lot of data. And I'm going to be talking, Julie asked me to do this with her because I've got a long history of mentoring. So,
and awards.
Okay, yeah, I do. I have two mentoring awards, yes. And then we're going to do another group exercise where we're going to break into groups to try to apply some of the principles to some case examples that we have. So that's the plan for the day. And I'm going to sit and Julie's going to start.
So we're going straight into mine?
I'm going straight into
Okay,
yours.
I didn't know if you were doing one of those case studies first.
No, we're going to do that.
Got it.
So there you go.
All right, so does this work?
No, that doesn't
It
work.
doesn't work at all.
Unless it's,
Okay.
we have to unhook something and hook something
Got
else
it.
up. So.
I just like to start with the definition of mentor because it can mean a number of different things. And it was interesting that this dictionary definition that I pulled actually includes therapist. But at the end of the day, we can use a number of different words, and it does include advising and training. And is it necessary? So I have pulled some data from the Council of Graduate Schools, and first we're going to look at data on master's degrees. So these are attrition rates for master's degrees. Within 6 months, we have master's students dropping off at the rate of 10%. After a year, approaching 20%, and within 2 years, still over 20%. So, when we lose students that we could potentially get to graduation, we're already investing in them, and we do a lot better if we can keep those and retain those students rather than having a lot of people fall out. And it's more than you might think. This is a completion rate of master's degrees, and it compares men and women, and it compares STEM and MBAs. And it's sort of interesting because, the MBA is really coursework only, looks very different than a STEM master's degree that is research. So you can see in the MBA world, the men do better. In the STEM world, the women actually do a little bit better. But we only have less than 45% of STEM master's students finishing within 2 years. It's a very small percentage. And within 3 years, we're at 60%, and then it doesn't get a whole lot better after that. If we looked at respondents that are assigned to an advisor by field and type of respondent, I think what's interesting about this is we have programs that are STEM programs that no one ever gets an advisor, or at least they responded that they didn't get an advisor. And the worst field is math and computer science, as far as responding whether they had an advisor in their master's program. A few quotes that came out of this study included, "My advisor is really good. He pushes me in my research." Jamie was a little bit concerned about pushing too hard. This student wanted the push. Here's another student. I got the distinct impression that my advisor didn't care much about me or my progress, except his labor to get his research project done. Right? So that happens too. In orientation, we had students come in from past cohorts to talk to us. Right off the bat, you really had a friendly environment. I threw that comment in from the study too, partly because it makes the point that mentoring doesn't just come from you. So we're really talking about advisor mentoring today, but it's important that these students are getting mentoring other places too. Maybe peer-to-peer mentoring, mentoring from other faculty besides just their advisor, professional mentoring, all of it's important. Factors contributing to degree completion. We're still just looking at master's students. So my advisor impacted about half the students. This is always disheartening for me as a faculty member. I want to think that every master's student I've ever had work with me would say, yeah, my advisor was instrumental in me finishing my degree, but we're only getting half of our students saying that their advisor contributed to degree completion. But we get 72% that say supportive faculty contributed to degree completion. So they are seeking some mentoring elsewhere, but once again, this is the kind of thing that you would just think would be 100%, right? At least we think we're that important that it should be 100%. Factors contributing to stop out and drop out. So lack of support from faculty. 33% master's students nationwide are saying they are stopping because they're not getting support from faculty. So this particular study from the Council of Graduate Schools makes 3 conclusions that I thought I would mention. One, you should host a faculty mentoring workshop. So good job, Julia. Advance is hosting a faculty mentoring workshop. They say, require that to be appointed to graduate faculty. At UNM, we consider anyone that's tenure track graduate faculty. And, really, everyone that's tenure track should be involved in mentoring. Assigning faculty members to students. I think this is important because I think there's some programs, because there's no assignment, students fall through the cracks, right? So there can be students that fall through the cracks that don't get the mentoring. And then additionally, may there be a mandatory review. I will tell you 9 out of 10 times when I get the desperate graduate student coming to graduate studies and feeling like nothing has gone right, their advisor has ignored them. And maybe partly because their advisor didn't know quite how to have the tough conversation with them. You know, the student may be needing to do something different, but the advisor wouldn't quite have that conversation with them either. And then match new faculty with experienced senior faculty mentors. So just making the point that mentoring goes all sorts of different directions. And when you come in as a new faculty member, someone needs to be talking to you about how you mentor your students. Let's look at doctoral students. So same organization, Council of Graduate Schools, 7-year completion and attrition rates by race and ethnicity. So now we're all doctoral students. African American students finishing at a 40% rate in 7 years. Hispanic students finishing at a 48% rate in 7 years. So both race ethnicity groups, less than half, are finishing their programs in 7 years. And similarly, more than a third are stopping out within 7 years. What about by broad field of study? So this is broken out where we're looking at engineering, life sciences, physical and math sciences, social and behavioral sciences. So life sciences, I think there tends to be a little bit more formal culture of mentoring, and they have the highest percentage rate, 7-year completion rate, but it's still, you know, right at a half. So obviously we can do better. 10-year cumulative completion rates for underrepresented students on doctoral degrees. So we had 42% at 7 years, give it another 3 and we get 8% more. It's not very good, right? And we invest a lot in doctoral students. So I think one of the reasons we back off from mentoring is because we think about the time it takes, and we tend to mentor students that are easy to mentor, are natural to mentor, someone that has some of the same interests as us, someone that's easy to get along with, that may be someone we'd be a friend with anyway. And then that leaves these other students not getting the same sort of attention. If we want to see that broken down by field, it's a trend that we've seen in all of these. So life sciences does a little bit better. The physical and mathematical sciences do the poorest. What about UNM? So those are national studies for master's students and doctoral students. At UNM, we have 200, and this is from a proposal that I submitted. So we're using fall 2014 because we want to look at how far they progressed over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So in fall 14, we had 284 Hispanic master's students, 515 white students, so 25% Hispanic, 45% white. So I showed this slide to your graduate staff advisors without showing them the CGS data. And I said, how many of your master's students finish? Well, what do you think they said? Well, all of our master's students finish, right? They come in, they're good students. Almost all of them finish. I think sometimes we think along those lines. So, oh, that's the doctoral. Sorry, things are off slightly there. So, in the master's program, 4 years later, 61% of our Hispanic students had graduated, 53% of our white non-Hispanic had graduated. So it shows that we do well with our Hispanic population, even though they are a smaller population and not near as large as our undergraduate population. But we still had on the order of 32% and 39% dropping out. That's a lot of students we're losing that we would like to see degree production from. And then at the doctoral level, so we're going back to 2010, this data was pulled last year, and over 60% of our PhD population had not completed. That's UNM's data. Thus, the need for mentoring.
That's 4 years.
No, for the doctoral students, they start in fall 2010, so I think it's 8 years. Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any statistics for what are the reasons that are driving them out of school? Is it just the mentorship or?
I have a few, don't have everything, but we have a few. So this is going back to the Council Graduate School study and looking at these underrepresented doctoral student responses to survey questions. So 31% said faculty are aware of issues facing underrepresented minorities, and almost that same amount said faculty are not all aware. And then we have a group in the middle. So we've got students that feel like faculty are not aware of their issues. Similarly here, we have 62% of our underrepresented minority doctoral students that are worried about mental or physical health. Thus your concern is real, right? Over 60% are concerned about their mental and physical health. At the same time, 95% of the students say they're supported by a group of students, and then 38% say they're isolated from other students. So I'm going to let Barbara, the psychologist, tell you what those two mean together, right? But it's interesting because when they asked if they're supported by a network of students, almost everybody says they are, but yet a huge percentage is still feeling very isolated. And then I circled this one also because I think it's sort of disheartening. Over half the students feel like they're losing interest in their field. When they were asked about factors affecting their achievement, these are doctoral students, 60% said their advisor. So the other 40% are saying not their advisor. Okay, here's a UNM survey. So gets to a piece of your question, just a piece. So at UNM, we did this survey, the Graduate Resource Center did this survey right about a year ago, and they compared Hispanic and non-Hispanic respondents, and they got a 21%, no, they had 720 people answer this survey. That's a pretty good sample, so we're pretty impressed that they were able to get that. So of that, our Hispanic students, 46% of them said they were first generation, whereas the white students said, or the non-Hispanic, they could be something, they don't have to be white, said 21%. 9% agree that they are in a supportive community. 9% of our Hispanic students agree that they're in a supportive community. And we at UNM tend to think that if anyone's providing support to Hispanic students, surely it's University of New Mexico. But our survey didn't show that to be the case. 5% agree that experienced students mentor new students, whereas 19% for the non-Hispanic population says they're seeing that. 30% considered leaving without a degree. Now here's the kicker, these last two. 11% of our Hispanic graduate students at UNM responded that they have a mentor. Basically 1 in 10. And 38% of the non-Hispanics said they have a mentor. Like, this is crazy, right? Then it drops even more on the Hispanic if they're mentored by a faculty member in their department. So, sometimes these surveys have biases because people that are disgruntled respond to them. It gives them a voice, but that's troubling. Another thing that came out of this is some students that said they were mentored, and then they were asked other questions like, have they ever contributed to an article? Have they ever had the chance to make a presentation? So we had students that say, yes, I'm mentored and my advisor's fantastic, but no, I've never contributed to an article or had the chance to make a presentation. So we have some things not matching up. So in response to that, I've pulled a few things. ASU posted these within the last year. I don't know how I'm doing on time, Barbara, because I don't see anything. I'm 2 minutes over. Well, then I'll just stop, but let you know, I can wrap it up in 2. So ASU posted these in the last year, and I think they're pretty good. This first sheet talks about creating a mentoring agreement. That's not something I've done, right? So when I have the graduate student that I really get along with well, and we connect, this seems so ridiculous because, you know, she and I are on the same page and we make it work and it works well and they finish and we're all happy. But that's not what every relationship looks like. Not every graduate student you have identifies with you, connects with you. Make a mentoring agreement. Talk about how often you're going to meet and what you're going to get out of this relationship, and set goals in that agreement, and goals that are SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. If you put something like that in place with all your students, it's going to improve things. And we have a few tools on our website too. Those 2 are not as good as the first one. 9 practices for mentor. These are kind of common sense things, but I like those first 2 handouts a lot. And then I wanted to point you to a few resources we provide on our website. So grad.unm.edu, if you go to resources, under that there's faculty staff resources. We have a link for mentoring resources. Some of the things there are better than others, but we have like an idea for the mentee to interview the mentor, right? Something where the student gets learns about things and thinks about things to ask. Another thing like that you might put in your mentoring agreement, you're going to take notes when you come and talk to me. There's all sorts of things that could be formalized in that mentoring agreement. So one of the things we have in the mentoring resources is this How to Mentor Grad Students Guide from Michigan. And it's a pretty lengthy document, actually. Some of it is really good. And I pulled from it just a few bullets. Know your mentee. Model and guide excellence in research, teaching, and service. Establish effective communication. This is my favorite, and it doesn't quite line up. Demystify graduate school. Did you see how many first-generation graduate students we had? We just take it for granted that they must know what they've got themselves into, but they may not have any idea what they've got themselves into. I think this demystify is important. Facilitate professional development, assist with finding other mentors, model professional responsibility, support mental health and well-being, not because you're a counselor or a therapist, but because you know the resources on campus. And then my last slide is the typical master's degree journey at UNM. We provide these sorts of walkthroughs on our website. It's a really easy way to help you demystify what the graduate school journey looks like. And if you can see in the upper left-hand corner, what I start with on this is meet with your advisor early and often. So it's the first thing we put on this master's roadmap, and we have a similar one for doctoral students. So I hope that, I'm sorry that I'm over, Barbara, because I told her I wouldn't.
So let me get, while we're on the topic of resources, UNM is now, and this is as of January, a member of the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity, NCFDD. Graduate students are included. So your graduate students can also, it's a really great resource for all of us, and it's not obvious from the name that grad students are members, but they are. Great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on to the next part, and as I mentioned, Julie asked me to join her in this workshop and to talk a little bit more personally about the way I think about mentoring and my experiences. So of course, being a good academic, I went and read like 20 new things about mentoring before I did this, but this is going to be pretty idiosyncratic in a lot of ways. I think my background is probably a little bit important here. I am a clinical psychologist by training, so I don't diagnose my students ever, but I have some sense of some of those resources. I've been mentoring for 45 years now. It was pretty scary. I've graduated 40 doctoral students. In that time, I've only had 2 students that didn't finish. One who came straight from undergraduate and decided that she was a little overwhelmed with the whole graduate school experience and graduated with a master's. And the other who unexpectedly got pregnant during graduate school and became very ill and had to go to bed for several months of her pregnancy, and after that decided that she needed to take care of herself and take care of her child, so she graduated with a master's as well. But I'm pretty proud of that record. And some of my students have been students going into clinical practice, some into research academic careers. I've also done a lot of training of psychology interns, medical students, and other people who are just, haven't been their primary mentor, but I've been around a lot of students in those kinds of mentoring roles. And I was at Brown, Rutgers, and I've been here for quite a while now. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think of as general principles of mentoring, what I also think about as phases of the mentoring relationship, the joys and challenges of mentoring, a couple of thoughts at the end. I'm going to use student examples all the way through, and there are going to be some places where I have tools for you. For those of you who had signed up in advance with emails I sent out the whole presentation in advance. For those of you who didn't get it, Julia's going to send it out again afterwards. So don't worry about it if you don't have it. If you don't have it right now, the tools will be available to you. So, and I did a lot of notes. So, and I can't read without my glasses. So this is going to be this is why we have this like weird setup here. So I think the first thing that I really want to talk about in terms of general principles is how I think as a mentor about what I think is important. And the first thing I think is passion. We are academics because we care deeply about the field that we're in. And we care about the work that we're doing. And I think that's probably the number one thing that I want to communicate to my students is what we're going to do together is important, and help them see what the big picture is, what the field looks like as a whole, and why they should be really psyched up about the work that we're going to do together. And I think we can communicate that pretty regularly, and it's important because sometimes we and they all get bogged down in the specifics and the requirements and all of that kind of thing, and it's helpful to hold that vision and that passion, I think. The second principle I always think about is what I've called kindness, caring, and respect. And I think there are a lot of parts to that. And a number of, in our little warm-up discussion, a number of people talk about this, but students are whole people. They've got parents, they've got grandparents, they have partners, sometimes they have kids, they have health problems, they have their personal passions. I had a graduate student who came to New Mexico and loves to fish. And he kept going up to the San Juan River to go fishing every weekend. And I finally had to say, you can't do that every weekend when you're a graduate student, but it's cool that you like fishing. So then he started skiing instead. But anyway, I think, we also have to remember that they, I think to a person, except for the narcissists, they're insecure. They, many of them get to graduate school and immediately have the imposter syndrome. Like, do I really belong here? They all know more than I do. Am I going to be able to be successful? Even if they feel okay about that, they're like, will I get my degree? What am I going to do afterwards? So there's just kind of an underlying anxiety that I think students experience that it's important for us to remember. And let's see, what else do I have here? Oh yes. Availability and responsiveness. I've been in a number of departments over my career, and oftentimes you walk down the hall, the faculty aren't there, or their doors are closed. And it sends a certain message to the students, which is, you can email me, but I'm not necessarily going to be here for you. And I think it's really important to be able to really think about our responsibility to be available to our students and to be responsive to them. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit. But my kind of rule of thumb is if a student texts me, and they don't do it very often, I should respond to that pretty quickly. Sometimes it's because it's clinical things, but I should respond quickly. If they email me, I should respond to them by the end of the day, unless they email me at 10 o'clock. And if they're going to give me something to read and review, I should get it done within a week. And I think, so those are just guidelines I use for myself. I don't always achieve those, but I think it's setting a standard for ourselves about being available. The next thing I have on here is student-centered mentoring. And I think we talked about this a little bit before, but sometimes, and that was one of Julie's slides, that sometimes grad students think that they're only being used to be research assistants. And they really can be helpful to us, obviously, in our own work. But I think our responsibility is to train them and help them develop, not to use them simply to help advance our own careers. And then finally, patience. They don't know as much as we do. So it's sometimes hard to remember that, but we do need to do that. So those are kind of general principles I use for myself. And then in terms of the mentoring itself, some of the principles that I like to focus on are, one is really being clear about my expectations. And this starts right at the beginning with a student. What do I expect from them in terms of the work that they're going to do with me? How responsive are they going to be to me? When are they going to show up? What their schedules are going to be. Sometimes I need to talk with them about things like how they dress and how they behave in the academic environment. So being really clear about those kinds of things. I think another thing we really always are needing to do with our students is really teaching them technical skills so that are necessary in their field, but also broad professional skills, how to write, how to present. And a lot of this is really hands-on kind of work. Providing opportunities for them. I'm going to go way over my time too, I'm afraid. Providing opportunities for them, like co-authorship, this, again, echoing something that Julie said, opportunities to present. Opportunities to arrange for speakers and interacting with them. It's kind of like, after a while think, oh, this is like such a pain. But for a student, to be able to contact a senior faculty member at another university, invite them, interact with them, even picking them up at the airport and driving them around, it's an opportunity for them to interact with more successful people, experienced people in the field. Even if you get manuscripts to review, inviting them to review a manuscript with you. So these are all opportunities. Yeah?
As also an editor of the journal, I should say though that they should state that this student had in the manuscript.
Yes.
Because a lot of times you see that the main faculty might be doing that, but it's not proper practice, not to give a credit to the student actually.
Right. That's a very good point. Yeah, and some journals don't allow it. Most journals have, a lot of journals have the criteria if you're going to invite somebody else to review a manuscript with you. So yeah, very good point. I appreciate that. Okay, I think of mentoring in really 4 phases. The first is the selection phase, and we pick people because they've got great credentials. Their work that fits with what you want to do. I also would like to generally select graduate students that I like and that I think I can work with. And I will say a few years ago, we had this fabulous graduate student who had applied to work with me. And oh my God, I interviewed him and I thought, I just don't like this guy. He was just so impressed with himself. And everyone was like, you gotta admit this guy, you gotta admit him. He look at it. And so I made him an offer of admission and he turned me down. And my second choice was the nicest guy on earth. He also had switched from a technical field into psychology, but when he had switched, he had a 397 in his undergraduate institution. He was actually in engineering. And he's ended up being one of my 2-star graduate students ever. and the nicest guy on earth. And I don't think, it was because I liked him that he did so well. I think he just was like super, super high quality. But it was one of those like reminders to myself, don't just pick people because of their credentials. I think in the first phase, which I call the sort of getting to know you, setting expectations, it's always good, I think, to have a conversation with them about why did you come to graduate school, what do you want to accomplish, tell them a little bit about yourself as a human being, and as I said before, sharing your enthusiasm, and then being really clear about your expectations, and like how frequently we're going to meet, what kind of training can I provide to you, what kind of work responsibilities will you have. And then being really clear about your own commitment also. Like I'm committing to be your mentor, and I'm going to come, and we're going to meet at this regular time, and I'm going to provide these opportunities for you. And then setting goals with them. This next slide gives you an example. I have an institutional research training grant from NIH, and it's a T32, and we require our pre-docs and postdocs to set goals each year. And this is this would not be the content that you would use, but we have the competency areas that we expect them to be making progress in. We list them all, and then we ask them to set their specific goals and when they expect to accomplish them. And then I have my students go further and then break it down month by month. What am I going to be doing this month? And sometimes things take several months, but it's a really good way to get them ready to really think about what they're doing. Then the working phase, I think, is this kind of ongoing work together, monitoring their goal achievement, and then eventually fostering their independence. So I advocate strongly for meeting with your students regularly. I do a weekly group mentoring meeting, and then we meet individually as we need to. Every month, I'm going to ask them about their progress towards their goals. We're going to problem solve about what the problems are. I have and I think this isn't unique to me at all, but I have a very strong belief in the importance of praising in public and giving negative feedback in private. So if I think a student is really having trouble, we might talk in a group meeting, to the degree of students willing to talk about problems or challenges they're having. But if I need to really give them feedback and talk seriously, that's an individual meeting. Sometimes, you really need to help identify with them challenges and problems. And I have a couple of examples here. I had a student who was showing up late for everything, late for meetings with me, late for classes, and we had to have a conversation. And it turned out the student was having terrible problems with sleep. And I finally said, maybe you should go to the sleep clinic. And she finally went and got diagnosed, and she had really severe sleep apnea. She was waking up more than 35 times a night. She got a CPAP, and it took a while to adjust to it, but she started being able to sleep and therefore being able to come on time to things. I've had a couple of students with terrible writing problems, like writing blocks. One of them, we came up with, it was an odd solution, but he said, I think I should just go take like a composition course at the junior college. And he went, and he said, because that'll get me writing, but I won't be worried about what I'm writing. So he did that. That was great. Another one who's a super, super smart guy, but absolutely was so paralyzed by doing big projects that he couldn't do them. And he said, I'd look at the computer for hours on end. So I finally said, all right, let's work out what you're going to need to do, and I'm going to give you one assignment each week. And we'd meet, and he'd say, but I have to do, and I'm like, no. We're only going to focus on this. You're writing your abstract this week. And I really had to help him learn how to contain his anxiety. And then we talked about rewards. So I said, M&Ms aren't a bad reward. So he worked out this whole schedule. It was really fun. It's like after 10 minutes, he had a bag of M&Ms, and he put his hand in it. If he pulled out certain colors, that meant he could stop writing for 5 minutes. And if he pulled out other colors, he was going to write for another 5 minutes. It was hysterical. But it worked. And it was such a weird solution, but it worked for him. And that's what we really needed to do. Oops. I have two different ways I need to be going down here. Let's go back to my notes for a second. Okay. Oh, yes. One of my colleagues does something that she calls cookie meetings. So along with the monthly goals, everybody, she writes them all on a whiteboard. And everybody who's achieved their goals for the month, somebody brings in cookies and you get a cookie. If you didn't achieve your goals, you don't get a cookie. I think that most people get cookies anyway. But the idea is, just make it a little bit more fun. Okay, I showed you our goal setting form, and then at the end of the year, this is for our 232, we have a form for reporting progress at the end of the year. And we actually evaluate them on this, and this determines whether they get reappointed. And this is just an example of part of it. So, setting very specific goals. What's the status? Did you achieve it or not? And you can, obviously these would be individualized to the students you're working with. The other thing I've included in the handouts, and I'm not going to go into this at all, but we at CASA, because we're a research center, we developed a set of steps to guide a mentor through mentoring a student to write a research grant. And I've included this, I might do something completely different, but I've included this because I want to show you how many slides this is. And we really tried to break it down. And it's enormously helpful for the students. I had one student who was writing an NRSA, a pre-doctoral grant, and she would come in every week. She'd say, okay, I'm supposed to do this week. And she would get it done. And so as you can see, this is like four slides full of guidelines for writing grants. And hopefully this gives you a model for a way to kind of break things down. So the last thing I want to talk about is just a little bit about the joys and challenges of mentoring. And we talked about this a lot at the beginning, so I'm not going to do this in a lot of detail. But, you get to work with smart people. You learn things from your students. They expand into new areas. I've had 2 graduate students who are really interested in criminal justice populations, which is very relevant to substance abuse research, which I do. I didn't know bupkis about, criminal justice populations. I know a lot now. I think you right away at the beginning talked about seeing them develop and seeing them flourish. I think another thing that's important, particularly at UNM, is we have opportunities here to expand diversity within our professions by mentoring students who are from underrepresented groups, and I think that's really, really cool. You develop lifelong relationships with them. I have a whole lot of students that, have become friends, and we see each other at conferences and get together, and it does reflect well on you. You get mentoring awards, so that's a nice thing. The challenges we've talked about, a number of them. I think a couple I just want to mention that I don't think we talked about as much as, first is just balancing your own responsibility and work with the needs of your students. And then we have all these things that students don't do. They don't get their work done, they're passive, they go off in a different direction. And I have some examples, but I'm not going to go into these. I have 2, there's an old book from the 1970s called Games People Play. And it's ways that people take stances and manipulate other people by their behavior. One of them is the help rejecting complaining. Julie, I don't know what to do. Julie gives me a suggestion. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not going to work. Julie, I don't know what to do. Julie gives me another suggestion. Everyone I'm sure has had a student like that. You've got great ideas. And then there's wooden leg is another game that people play. And that's like, what can you expect from a person with a wooden leg is the concrete thing. But what can you expect from me? You're like, I came from a small town, or my mother doesn't love me, or whatever. People create their own little handicaps, and it's hard to get through them. And then obviously we have personal problems of mentees. I'm not going to go into the details there, but just a couple of quotes that I particularly liked. Oprah Winfrey, a mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. John Rohn, my mentor said, let's go do it, not you go do it. How powerful when someone says, let's. Steven Spielberg, the delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. And finally, Winston Churchill, we make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give.